Between the governor and the legislature, do we see a real balance of power between the two, or do we really see, a governor who's, got 40 years of experience, and with a legislature that's still learning, and it accrues to the governor's benefit?
I would say that the governor definitely has the upper hand, but if he can't wield it too strongly, get out of hand with it, because it's still a balance of power in that he needs to respect the other chamber. In the case of the minimum wage, I think it was to his benefit to cut a deal ahead of time this year and avoid going to the ballot and having the fight there, having the unions fight it out, and he'd rather have the unions save some of that money that they would have spent on a campaign in November, perhaps spend some of it instead on his own criminal justice measure in November, spend some of it perhaps on the Prop 30 campaign that while he hasn't endorsed it, he certainly, I think, would like to see that pass.
Yeah, I would say, I think the governor still holds the upper hand, and I don't think that's surprising in this town. In the term-limited era, I think governors have had a stronger hand than the legislative branch has had. But I think that's the point that I would make. Jerry Brown is 5 years into his return. I don't know if I can even call it that anymore. I'm trying to figure out what the right narrative frame is. But he's 5 years back into this return to Sacramento. And the first few years, we talked all about fiscal problems of the state. He came in with the big deficit. He pretty much was given carte blanche, I think, to do things the way he wanted to, notwithstanding this fight about the veto of the budget in 2011. But as the legislature's changed, I think that dynamic is going to change. And as the term limits law changes to 12 years, I think that long-term you're going to see a bit more balancing of the legislative and executive branch power. This governor has more power because he has a 40-year track record. The next governor, whoever it is, Gavin Newsom, Tom Steyer, John Chung, who, by the way, John Chung's running. He pretty much made it official today. There's some news. Whoever else it is, I'm trying to think of a Republican. It's not a joke. I'm trying to think of a Republican who's going to run. But whoever that next governor is, I think is not going to come in with that same power that a Jerry Brown has. And so I think that would be different. And then just quickly on the minimum wage, because you and Juliet both mentioned it, to me the great takeaway of the minimum wage discussion is the law that the governor signed in 2014 that changed the initiative process. There was discussion as to whether it was a big or a mild change to the initiative process, but the biggest change that I think played out with minimum wage, of course, is this ability to pull a ballot measure back. It gives an enormous amount of power, I think, to the negotiating process of having a measure. There were two minimum wage measures. We know there was one still circulating for signatures, and there was one that had already qualified for the ballot. And I think that is a huge game changer in somebody like Brown or anybody else saying, I've got to cut a deal on this now, because the alternative, to Juliet's point, either because he wants the campaign money or the alternative measure is not one that he wants.